Hello and welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today in a new episode of Let's Talk About Data Show. My name is Ibrahim Amara. I'm a database specialist solutions architect here at AWS, and I'm one of your regular hosts for the show. Today, we have an interesting topic to talk about and to discuss, and I believe many of our viewers will be interested in. Today, we are talking about masking the data within your database. And for that, I'm very pleased to have my colleagues Samir and Kier to join me today to discuss this topic. Let me first start by asking them to introduce themselves. So, Kier, would you like to start?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Kair Devan. I'm a principal product manager at Aurora RDS. I've been with the company for over 6 years and focus on multiple things under the database banner.
Thanks, Kier. To you, Samir.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Samir. I'm Principal Database Specialist in Enterprise Support Org in AWS, and I've been with AWS for about 6.5 years. I spend majority of my time working with customers, talking to them about how to scale their data operations and how to scale their workloads on AWS databases.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And on chat, we have Jeff and Tony to support you with the chat. If you have any questions, you have any comments, please don't hesitate to send them to us. And let's start by discussing about the our topic today, which is dynamic masking in Aurora Postgres. This is a new announcement that we have announced around reInvent time, and the data masking itself is a quite challenging topic. Um, and I remember for most of the conversations that I have with my customers, or even back in time when I used to work as a DBA on premise, the data masking topic was always there. It's always a requirement from the business to do masking to the data within the databases. So let's start first by giving our viewers more clarification about what's meant by data masking in the database.
Sure. Samir, mind if I give that a go and then maybe you can jump in?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Uh, so I want to break this down in a very simplistic way. So data masking is a security mechanism or a technique that essentially helps you protect sensitive information. And it does so by replacing, hiding, or obfuscating the original data with some sort of modified content. And the goal really here is to make sure that the obfuscated data looks realistic, but at the same time, it hides the real individuals and does not expose any confidential information. Um, there are mostly two types of common scenarios that you hear from customers when it comes to
Hmm.
data masking. One is static data masking,
Hmm.
and the other is dynamic data masking. Uh, so static data masking is where you permanently alter data and maintain a copy of that in the database. Uh, whereas dynamic data masking is a little bit more complex in the sense that you don't change the original data. The data stays unmodified. But in real time, when you access the data from your production database, based on who you are, your role assigned within the organization, and what kind of permissions are available to you, you get to see data which is either unmasked, partially masked, or fully masked. That's what dynamic data masking is. So that's an overview of what data masking is, at least from my perspective. Samir, would you like to add something here?
No, I think you have covered it quite comprehensively. Uh, they the only thing I would add probably is that both of them serve very different purpose. Dynamic data masking is more useful when you have production database and you want to not alter the data or the quality of it and still give access to different roles from the same copy of data. Whereas, like you called out, your static data masking is more for creating test scenarios or creating a copy of data that you want to use in some kind of non-production testing.
Yep.
That's perfect. But I believe even with the test scenarios, because I recall some of the cases or some of the challenges that we were facing on premise when we are doing static data masking is that the teams who are testing the application need like realistic data, not just data updated with static, um, just some random strings or some stuff like that. Maybe for the sensitive columns, yes, they don't need access to that. But for the rest of the data, they need more realistic data, and especially when it comes to the data with higher relational data and maintaining the differential integrity in the data. So I believe dynamic masking in a case like that would play a major role and can solve an issue like that, right?
Yeah, just trying to understand. I get the perspective right. You're saying that in scenarios where you need to make sure that the data looks production like, and especially in terms of its databases, especially in terms of its data types, or the functional quality of that data that remains intact. And yeah, you're right. In that case, that's where dynamic data masking is the most useful.
Perfect. Thanks. Yeah, exactly. That was the purpose of the question. It seems that my internet is acting up or something like that, so it seems that I'm cutting a bit. So okay, so let's move to the next question, which is right now before because the solution that we are talking about today is the dynamic masking in Aurora Postgres using an extension that has been built specifically for this purpose. But before that, for the customers that you were working with, how they are currently implementing, or before the solution, how they are implementing the data masking.
Okay, you two want to take a stab at it first? Uh,
Sure, happy to take a stab at that. So today, customers they do it in multiple ways. They have they either go with a proprietary third-party solutions. There are multiple solutions out there, or they build their own. So there's homegrown solutions as well, right? So there are commercial solutions that address the space in some ways. There are open source options as well, or build your own. And some customers choose when they're building their own, what they have to do is they choose to maintain multiple copies of data with different levels of masking and handling and building the logic within the application itself. Uh, there are other customers and some open source solutions that take the approach of creating views or functions to hide complex masking logic from application. So these are some of the approaches that I've learned about based on my interactions with customers. But Samir, I think you can shed more light. You work very closely with some of these customers on a regular cadence and into the weeds in terms
yeah,
of helping them out. So
yeah. Some customers end up using third-party extensions or a proxy layer, wherein the proxy intercepts the data that's coming, or the queries which are coming, and rewrite them, or it intercepts the data and masks it and then sends it back to the application. Some customers end up handling this at the database level with views and functions to hide the complexity of the masking logic from the proxy, or from the application itself. The maintenance and management of these implementations, they are often costly in terms of performance penalty that you pay, or in terms of the amount of effort you spend on maintaining them, managing them, version controlling them. Imagine new users being added or new kind of roles being added, and you have to modify your logic constantly. They are, and that makes them prone to security vulnerabilities, and especially with use cases where you have data traveling between different hops, from database to
Yeah,
proxy or to some other end, or where you're using masking function or a view. A sophisticated user could bypass that if you have not been careful enough. So because of all that complexity involved, believe me, or don't believe me, a lot of customers end up not dealing with it at all. And they say that we will end up compromising the functionality for which we need this kind of masking and will not go ahead and use the support those use cases.
Yeah,
And
I,
some,
b- I
sorry,
believe
go
you
ahead.
because I believe you because I was there before as an on-premise DBA and yeah, choosing between those different options to implement the data masking, it's quite difficult, quite challenging. And as you mentioned, maintaining all of that, and whenever there is like a schema change, a new column has been added, or as you mentioned, a new user has been introduced into the system, and having a central location to manage all of that, it's a nightmare. So yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. Uh, but before going to deeper, we have an interesting question from Ilya that's which one of our regular viewers. This may be silly, but what's the difference between data masking and encryption? For me, it's a very interesting question, to be honest, and we need to clarify the
Okay.
difference between both.
Yeah. Yep. So encryption is something where you store data in an encrypted format. So you're
Hmm.
basically changing the way data is being stored.
Yeah.
You retrieve it and decrypt it. In order to decrypt that data, you need the encryption keys. Whereas data masking is a mechanism through which you do not, well, in case of static data masking, you do change the data.
Hmm.
In case of dynamic data masking, you do not change the data that is being stored. Dynamically, based on the access level that you have, you will see different uh, values. Now, to give an example, credit card information, when you enter that credit card information during a payment process, it goes in an encrypted format over the web. It is not going as raw numbers. And when this credit card information is seen in your credit card statements typically, or even when you log into your bank accounts, you'll see XXX or masked values and only the last four digits. So that's what data masking is.
Hmm.
Hope that example kind of gives some perspective or some idea into that difference. But
Perfect.
yeah,
So
that's an interesting question.
yeah, so just to summarize, the encryption you are that it's mainly how the data are being stored in an encrypted way. So it's by doing that you are even if someone um, gain physical access to the data, they would not be able to do anything with it because at the end of the day, it's encrypted. They are just stored in a way that it only can be translated if you have the proper key to decrypt them, and then you will be able to read the proper data or the original data, which is not the case for the masking. And as you mentioned, for the static masking, you statically or permanently uh, changing the data, how they or the replacing the data with some other data formats or some other strings or whatever the data types that you are storing, and the dynamic masking, the data is still there, but you just uh, the way that you are retrieving it is different.
Yeah. I, so I would like to just see if I can
Please.
simplify this a little
Yeah.
bit. Uh, so in my mind, dynamic data masking is where you replace sensitive information with some sort of fictitious data, but that has similar format, different
Mhm.
values. So, for example, if you're looking at a social security number, it needs to represent that format.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're using encryption, it is gibberish. It's unreadable. It's some sort of a ciphertext. You're using an algorithm to change, convert the original data, right? And the whole purpose is, let's say you want to transmit data in transit, right? You want to push or move that data in some sort of an encrypted manner to protect that data. So
Hmm.
that's where it comes more handy in many cases. When you're transmitting over networks or even in storage media as well. But I feel like it's more better suited for transmission versus the kind of use cases we're talking with dynamic data masking here.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Kier. So Also, we have a data guy who's saying, hello, looking forward to this show. Masking data is always painful. I agree with you, data guy. And also, we have Marion in the cloud. Hello, everyone. Joined late. No worries. And then, yeah, here it says, I see that makes thing. Thank you. So thanks, Otiri, and thanks, Samir and Kier. Okay, so back to the topic again, and maybe this question that I should have asked it earlier is why the customers would like even to master data? What's the need? What are the different scenarios to master the data?
Well, let me take a stab at this one, and Samir, you can jump in. Uh, the primary driver for a lot of data masking is regulatory bodies for
Mm,
compliance. And there is more and more awareness and sensitivity around not having data breaches, right? Ensuring that your data is being shared in a safe manner. Uh, so let me elaborate a little bit, right? Like if you look at organizations such as the banking industry, the
yeah.
healthcare systems, right? Payment information. So when you're dealing with online vendors or what have you, right? All of these customers or all of these industries, right, carry sensitive data that needs protection. And if they fail to protect that kind of data, there are severe penalties. Like I just have something sitting in my home right now that I have to sign. It's a class law action mass suit against AT&T for data breach, right?
Mm,
So the point being that organizations have to protect sensitive data, and when they fail to do so, uh, they maximize their breach risk, right? That is one part. And then as these kind of events have come to surface, uh, there's regulatory requirements enforced saying, hey, you have to comply. And some of those regulatory bodies are, for example, GDPR in Europe, which is General Data Protection Regulation, right? There's HIPAA
mm,
in the US, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. There's PCI DSS. This is a standard. I think there's a
yeah.
4.0, which is the latest standard today in the industry. But that is the payment card industry for data security standards, right? And in order to comply, dynamic data masking can help them achieve that compliance, right? Uh, and one more thing that crosses my mind is when you want to share data even within your organizations, right? We spoke earlier how depending on your role you may have different level of access, right? Not everybody needs to look at every data. So ensuring right kind of role level access uh, also is useful. So think about it that way, right? Like if I'm a customer support engineer at a banking system, I should not be exposed to all the secure social security digits, but only the last four.
Yeah.
Uh, if I'm an analyst doing some sort of study patterns, then I don't need access at all to social security. Uh, but I may need access to things like, hey, age group or
Exactly.
geography, right? Where they're located. So companies also have internal needs in terms of how they want to manage data. And it becomes challenging, as we discussed previously, like maintaining multiple copies or building some sort of a view-based approach where things can be bypassed if you get creative.
Perfect.
Uh, I'll just add something. For
Sure,
me as
please.
a consumer, uh, having that trust in the enterprises whose services I'm leveraging is very important. So,
Mm,
as you know, if you're a bank, if you're a telco, building that trust with your customers is very important. Uh, when customers share their medical data, their medical history or personal information or financial data, they're placing trust in your organization. Uh, it gives me a lot of comfort when I call up my bank and when I'm trying to get some information. They say, "So we don't have access to this information. We cannot
yeah.
see all the details." And it gives me it takes the process a bit longer, but it gives me a lot of relief to know that everybody in our organization doesn't have access to my personal information or to my FIN number, which is the equivalent of social security number here in Singapore. So
Yeah.
that's very important. Uh, Demonstrating that commitment to privacy and security that helps protect the brand reputation of be it bank, telco, fintech. It's important for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the bottom line here is like it's in our minds, it's not a nice to have feature, right? This is something every customer needs based on what industries they serve, and it essentially helps them protect from financial penalties, achieve compliance, minimize risks for security breaches, and even reputational damage, which Samir was talking about, right? Like building that trust and not losing that reputation that your data is safe with us.
Yeah, and I believe that making that possible with somehow an easy way to implement would make things challenging and
Looks
very
like
complex. I'm sorry.
all good.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was saying that, yeah, sometimes when, as you mentioned, Kia, when the solution itself is very complex to me, then that might deter the customers away from implementing it. So if the solution that is being offered can be easily implemented, so that will make things easier for the customers to use it. And that's what we are announcing, which is the dynamic masking for Aurora Postgres. So if you can give us more details about it and what the challenges that this solution is addressing.
Sure, happy.
Kale,
Yeah,
before you
go.
take that question, I want to touch upon what the data guy called out. He said data masking is difficult, something along those lines. Isn't that what he
Yeah,
said earlier? Yeah.
painful actually.
Uh, it's always painful, right? Okay, you talk to a lot of customers through this process, and I think it
Yeah,
would be great if we can talk about, if we can distill that one statement into some of the things, why data masking is challenging. What are the challenges with some of the things that we talked about earlier?
yeah. Sorry. There was
So,
a question, a follow-up question. Sorry. Yeah, there's a follow-up question from Devin Fadili regarding the question that has been asked before, the difference between the encryption and data masking. So masking is a layer on top of encryption. So I believe it depends on the use case. Do you need the masking or the encryption, or do you need both? In this case, you can have both of them at the same time, right?
yeah, absolutely. It's not something where you have to make a choice, but it also depends on what kind of security posture and what kind of security uh, threats you're trying to fence against, and where do you want to implement what. Uh, it depends on your use case.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to encrypt the data on storage as well as in the field and then just have masking on top of it? Do you just want to encrypt the storage and then make sure that data is encrypted in transit using TLS
SSL.
connections everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and then just use data masking to protect it against unauthorized access among users who have access to the database? So it really depends on your use cases and where you would use what.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. So another question is about, so mask keyword works on Postgres. So I think this is what we're going to see within the demo itself, how the masking is happening using the new extension that we have on Aurora Postgres.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit of how this is implemented. I think we'll do a demo.
Okay.
So yeah, we can go back to the question around launch because it looks like we can get into the demo in some time.
Sure, yeah. I think in 5 minutes or so, we will start with the demo. So let's go back again. So about the launch itself. You mentioned that it's an Aurora Postgres. It's an extension, right? It's being implemented through an extension.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely. So,
mm,
so Aurora Dynamic Data Masking is implemented as a Postgres extension.
mhm,
There are thousands of extension available, and this is available as an extension on Aurora Postgres. We call it PG column mask,
mhm,
uh, and and what it is everything based on what we discussed. Is this extension represents a modern, efficient approach that essentially combines security,
mhm,
performance, and ease of use for protecting your sensitive data at
mhm,
the database level without requiring any application change or maintaining multiple copies of data. That's what this is, and this is how Postgres operates. This is the power of Postgres is you
mhm,
have the ability to build extensions and add new features and capabilities that you require as you start running more and more modern workloads on your Postgres, right? Um, Now, one thing to call out is PG column mask or dynamic data masking, right? It's one and the same, but I just want to put it out there. Uh, what it does is it enables column level protection, and it is kind of complementary to the Postgres native row level security,
mhm,
uh, right? Uh, and with PG column mask, you can essentially control access sensitive data, uh, and you will see that in the demo through SQL-based masking policies, right? And define how data appears to user at query time based on their
mhm.
roles. Essentially, the end goal is to help you protect your data and reach your compliance requirements. Um, Further along in terms of what PG column mask does, again, I don't want to steal the thunder. Samir is going to walk you through the demo, but he'll essentially show you how you can create flexible masking policies, right? And you can do so using some of the built-in functions that we support with the extension, or you have the option to even define your own functions for masking. And you'll also see in the demo that your masking policies or rules that you apply can either hide information completely or it can replace partial values based on how you define. Um, so that's what we launched as an extension, which is PG
Mm.
column mask, to get to the point where you can do dynamic data masking.
Perfect. So, Samir, I think if we start with the demo so that we can go through the different steps that the customers need to do in order to implement that, and then maybe we'll be covering other questions as well while we're going through it. So
Yeah,
let's go with the demo.
sure.
Before that, sorry, so the Jeff has shared the link to the PG column mask or the dynamic masking, so you can get more details about it from this link. Also, there is a blog. This blog you can go to in order to find out more details about it and how to use the dynamic masking in Aurora Postgres. And part of the code, I believe, that we'll be using in this demo is also mentioned in the blog, right, Samir?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So if you want to redo the same actions or do the same queries that we are going to run here, you can refer to the blog to do that. Perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
Samir.
So to keep things simple and make sure that the demo goes smoothly, what I've done is I've put some of these scripts into SQL files, and I can just show them to folks here. I have certain users created in the database. I'm gonna run the script just to make sure that we do the demo right from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
What you see here on the screen is not really a very good security practice. I've just kept all the password just for the sake of simplicity in this demo,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not what you should be doing ideally. Uh, And then you'll see there are a number of different roles created. What I will be demonstrating here is that there is a role called analysts, and there is a senior analyst role. They're nested. So all the senior analysts are also analysts. And then there is a policy admin, and I explain the purpose of this particular role.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a user which is going to be part of policy admin role or policy administration group. And then I've got a member in each analyst and senior analyst group. Then I've got a database creation script, which basically just creates the database, grants enough privileges to allow these users to make a connection to the database and access the schema and read and write in that schema.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have got a table creation script, which basically is going to create two different tables and grants access to analyst. I'm going to execute the table using db owner user just to make sure that there is a separate owner. Analysts don't own the table, they can read the table. And then there's a separate insert script that I have got. So what I'm going to do is very quickly just run these scripts. All the scripts that I have just demonstrated you, I'm just going to run them one by one. Right, so I've got some data inserted in account table and some data inserted in the ledger table. If we go ahead and use the super admin user or the RDS admin user, you will be able to see that user has privileges to access all the data. So they can see all the data in clear text, both from account table or when they go and access the ledger data, which is what transactions have they done, where are they spending money, what is the MCC code or the merchant code of these transactions. So anybody having access to this data can know the financial limits of that particular person and their spending pattern. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the extension PG column mask. And then the moment I create that extension, there are certain things that get enabled in the database. There is this new schema that is added and a bunch of different procedures or functions that are added here. Some of these functions are useful for me to create the function, manage the create the policy, manage the policy, if in case I want to alter some of the behavior of that policy. And then there are some built-in functions to implement masking, like mask text. I can just show you what that does. If I pass it my name is, I forgot to add the schema prefix. And then you'll see that. So it also adds, go ahead, Ibrahim.
Yeah, I was going to say that as Kier mentioned that those are the predefined masking functions, but that will not prevent you from using your own custom masking functions as well.
Exactly. Yep.
Yes.
These are built in, but you can define your own.
Perfect.
You can define your own functions as well. Yeah. And then there is one particular parameter related to this extension that I want to call out, which is policy admin role. Sometimes you don't want the database owners to create the policy or maintain the policy. You want to give that credentials or that responsibility to somebody who is like a SecOps admin of your database. Yeah. And that is something you can do by setting a database level parameter through parameter groups, both in database cluster parameter groups and database parameter groups. through this setting, what you are basically now doing is allowing a user who is member of policy admin role here. So anybody who is member of this role will be able to define the masking policies.
And
So let me go ahead and
that's the database level, the whole databases within the cluster itself.
yes. So any database where you would want to use the extension or the data masking features, you will need to create the extension. And yes, this policy admin now has ability to create policies in any of the databases which it can connect to.
So I mean that if you change it at from the parameter group, that's a global change that will apply to all databases. It cannot be
Yes.
overridden at the database level or something like that.
No,
Okay.
it is something that you define in the parameter group. Yes.
Perfect. Which makes sense if you want to centralize, as you mentioned, centralize the management of all these policies creation. So it's just maybe, as you mentioned, that SecOps account that's responsible for that.
Yep.
Perfect.
And what I'm going to do now is use that user to create policies. This should be very fast, but what I'm going to do is show you these policies and explain them to you. So here is a policy that the first argument is basically the name of that policy. And it says it's being applied to the table accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And it applies to these 3 fields. And you define these fields in JSON format, in which you define key value pair saying, if you see the column account holder name, apply the masking policy using this expression, and that's going to be mask text. Now, this is very straightforward.
Yeah.
In this case, you'll notice for account balance, I'm trying to round it off to the nearest thousands by using PG catalog built-in function. One of the best practices that I would say you should follow is always prefix the schema name here so that somebody doesn't set the search path and then overrides whatever was your intended schema path. Then the next.
So it's not only the masking, the user masking to what we know about, but also you can use some functions, built-in functions like the round function, so that in this case, I believe this you don't want to return the exact account balance, but just something rounded. So okay, perfect.
A lot of times you use this for some sort of analysis, right? Like
yes, exactly.
Right. Not so. I mean, like, how many customers do I have who have, let's say, their bank balance between 1,000 and 10,000?
Yes.
Right. Things of that sort. That's where this comes handy.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you are trying to create some categorization within the customers or segment your customers, that's when this is useful.
Perfect.
The next argument in this function is basically saying apply this logic to analysts, which is the Postgres role or the group where this policy applies.
So
and
this is
then
an
there is
array that it can accept
yes.
multiple values. Okay, so I can add.
Yes.
Okay.
So I can use the same policy applied to multiple users. I can also define multiple policies on the same table, and you'll see that example in a little bit when I scroll further down. And then this is the weight of the policy. I'll explain why I'm setting this weight to 50 and what it means. I have a similar call to PG column mask function create masking policy to mask data in ledger table for analyst users. Now, here I'm telling that, okay, you don't show amount at all. Just return 0. Whenever you see somebody asking for amount of the transaction, where I don't want analysts to see where people are spending their money, how much are they spending. And then if I have senior analysts who should see some more details, in that case, I'm masking the customer ID, but I'm showing some details of it. I'm retaining the format of the customer ID, and I'm showing some digits of it so that they can use them for some uh, analysis, or where they want to segregate users from each other, but still
Mhm.
they should not see the whole customer ID. And I'm saying if they want to see the account balance, you can show them the account balance to the nearest decimal.
Mhm.
And this is where the weight comes in play. I'm saying the weight of this is 100. So anybody who has been granted senior analyst role, both policies will apply to them. One is inherited and the other one is directly applicable to them.
Because you
And
mentioned that senior analyst is a nested role, so it's already inheriting
yes,
the okay.
exactly,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly,
Mm.
exactly. And in runtime, it's going to apply this policy for customer ID and account balance for anybody who is a senior analyst.
Mm.
But a senior analyst is also an analyst. So for other columns, like account holder name, it will still apply the first policy. So in runtime, we can
Mm.
apply multiple policies to the same query. We don't have to just restrict it to one policy. That way, that's how the name dynamic data masking. Dynamically, in the runtime, the query gets rewritten, and we'll talk about some of those details later on uh,
Mm.
of how that happens. Okay.
So just to clarify, if we end up having multiple policies touching the same column, they definitely be depending on the weight, which one will be applied.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
So in one policy, I can define multiple columns like you see here.
Hmm.
I can define multiple policies on the same column. And in runtime, it's the weight that decides which one gets applied.
Perfect. So the higher the weight, it means that is the one that will be applied.
Yes, higher the weight, that's the one that's going to be applied. And just, I'll advise customers, just do yourselves a favor, have enough difference between the weights when you're defining policies.
Mm-hmm.
So in the future, if you have more different policies to be included, or if you want to create other roles, you can
Mm-hmm.
just use the numbers in between.
And if I don't specify a value, there is a default value for that, for the policy weight.
Uh, no, I think
Yeah,
it's a mandatory parameter. Sorry, go ahead,
no,
Kay.
there is a default. It sets to null.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh, and this was like, I just want to share. This was a very interesting debate internally we had when we were going through defining the product. So at AWS, we treat security as priority 0, right?
Mm.
So which means your lowest number represents the highest priority
Mm.
in many ways, and this is kind of counterintuitive, because now
Yeah.
we are saying your highest number is the highest priority, right?
Mm.
And a lot of organizations use that kind of mental model of priority 0 being the highest, right?
Yeah.
uh, but we debated and discussed, and we felt like this approach gives like the most flexibility, especially when you want to add, as Samir was saying, right? Be careful, because if you're not careful, and if you assign something as a priority, let's say we had lowest priority as the highest, lowest priority number as the
Yeah.
highest priority, and you start off by defining a policy and assign, let's say, a value of 1,
Yeah.
and over time period, when you start adding more policies and you need something at a higher priority, it's going to start getting challenging. So
Exactly.
so you're going to hit the floor or the ceiling fairly quickly, whatever you want to call it, right? Over time. And that's why we thought the ease of use, the flexibility for weights is going to come from if you can keep adding higher numbers, right? You can go all the way wherever you want to. So that's some of the
Makes
background there.
sense. Yeah. Perfect. Thanks a lot for the clarification, Keo. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm
So
gonna connect.
yeah.
So go ahead, Abraham.
Yeah, I was going to say that. So for the creation of the policies, we have used the user, which is in this case was Samir or Sam Kumar, and that user has the policy admin privilege, right? Or assigned the
Yes.
policy admin. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Something interesting, you don't need to give that user access to any of the tables.
Yeah, that makes sense. Of course. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they are like pure SecOps role who don't have access to data.
exactly.
They cannot see data themselves, but they can define policies of how that data should be exposed to different users.
Exactly. This is how this aggregation of roles happen. Yeah, perfect.
And let me go ahead and connect with the user chain and let me try and access a specific row.
Hmm.
And you can see that the account holder name is fully masked. The account balance has been
Rounded.
masked to the nearest thousand,
Mm,
which was something
one, two.
in the,
Okay.
you know, so that was 12,500.34. But
Hmm.
what I see here is 13,000. And if I go and change this user and try and connect with Shirley, which is the,
Super analyst in this case.
yeah, a senior
Mm.
analyst, and you
Oh,
can see the
yeah, sorry.
difference. They see a little bit more precise data now. They see to the
Yeah,
nearest decimal. They can also see the last few digits of the customer ID, but
yeah.
rest of the details are still masked for them. And you'll see that if I try and do an explain on this, okay, let me say explain, analyze, and that should.
Okay.
It actually doesn't show me the columns being projected
Hmm.
uh, because I'm using star here. And yeah, so what I was trying to show here is basically how this gets implemented in runtime. When the query is hitting your database server, Postgres
Hmm.
engine, it goes through a few phases. It goes through
Yeah,
the parse phase, then there is a parse tree that gets created, then that goes to the optimizer, and that is what is used for planning the query, and then that final plan gets executed. In between the parse and the phase, optimize phase, in between there is a rewrite process. There is a
yeah.
rewrite hook. In PG column mask, we have leveraged that rewrite hook to rewrite the query. It's the same hook that's also used by row level security. And as part of that hook, what we do is we introduce these additional uh, column expressions that we have defined in the policy, and that gets introduced in the query. So it's just native PostgreSQL way. Another interesting thing is these data types are exactly same. The data type that is being returned here is exactly same as the native data type of that table, which means if I'm building an application, I don't have to make any changes there. It uses the same data types.
And
So
that's why
all
we
these
have
things,
different masking functions as well. It's one for the dates, one for the strings, I believe, or the
yeah,
text. Okay.
yes,
So that
yes,
the return type and if you are planning to create your own masking function, I believe one of the precautions or the one of the prerequisites is that the return type is the same as the data type that you are masking.
it must be the same. Yes,
Hmm.
it must be the same.
Perfect. And just there was a question. I think it's more clear now that when you were testing the data masking function, what's the use case of return mask data in text? We're just testing the masking function, but as you can see here in the Real example, if you are an analyst or someone who are not allowed to access this kind of data, then they will be just seeing masked data, but for the rest of the data that they are interested in, they will be able to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So that will bring us to another question, because one of the challenges that we talked about is, okay, the ease of use. Yes, I can see that it's easy to use it. There's no modifications at the application level. You are not creating any views on top of the tables and all of these challenges that we've seen before. But what about the performance? Because you mentioned that there is a query writing and there are some changes that will happen at the query level. How the performance is impacted in this case?
So we've
Uh,
done extensive testing, and with the help of Samir was a part of this entire launch process where he brought in a lot of customer facing scenarios, and I'll let him talk to that, right? What he did and how he did it. But to give the higher order bits here, we saw negligible overhead in terms of
Mhm.
performance when masking policies applied. Uh, so it's more nuanced, and I'll pass the baton on to Samir to again talk about what he did and how he did. So over to you,
yeah.
Samir.
So just want everybody to recall something Keyor said in the very beginning, that we are not storing multiple copies of data, which
Yeah.
means when it comes to insert, there is no performance overhead. Whatever you're ingesting or sending through insert or copy command, we're just putting it as it is in the database, plain simple thing. So there is no performance penalty that you're paying for inserting data that needs to be masked while retrieving it. When you run a select query, that is when we apply the masking policy.
Mhm.
And the masking policy or the performance overhead is very negligible from the rewrite perspective. It's very negligible performance impact. We were even not able to get to a single digit when it comes to just comparing uh, the rewrite bit. When you use a masking function that's masking the data, the performance overhead or the overhead on the utilization of the database instance is again very little. It's 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 in most of the tests that I ran, it was less than 5%. Again, you should
Mhm.
test your own workload.
Yeah, of
You should
course.
test your scenarios to make sure what it looks like for you. But and the reason why I'm putting that caveat or that disclaimer is because at the end of the day, it is primarily going to depend on the masking function that you use.
Mhm.
The lowest penalty that you'll pay is on the built-in functions of PG column mask, because they are in they're implemented in C language. Same for Postgres inbuilt functions. If you use a lot of nested function calls, if you could bring up my screen again, I can just show
Sure.
uh, what I mean by that nesting. Uh, so, you know, if you have, for example, here, I'm making a call to a few functions. Now, if this was nested with several more functions, that performance penalty becomes a little bit more, but still not going to be significantly noticeable. And we have not just tested with a single session, we tested all the way from 2 users to 1,000 concurrent users, and we didn't see significant impact there. But when you start using PL/PG SQL functions, that is where you will see some performance overhead, because most of these PL/PG SQL, because they cannot be expanded inline by the optimizer.
Mhm.
So ideally, if you want to keep the impact to the minimum, use the built-in functions or use PostgreSQL PG catalog functions. If you define your own functions, use the SQL language to define the function.
Mhm.
They can be expanded in line and they perform the best. Uh, and then if you have some complex logic, yeah, of course, you can use PLPG SQL function. Avoid things like looping through or using some other SQL queries. Avoid those things uh, when you're trying to make sure that it performs optimum.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
Yep, sorry,
Samir,
please.
uh, you've been engaged with a customer in Asia, right? Since we launched this, it's been what, like 3 weeks now since we launched this capability. Can you tell us where they're at in their journey, and what does that look like for them?
Yeah, I think for them, they were quite happy with the fact that they do not have to manage this in the application code, and they have not been using any kind of masking feature before, so they had to kind of say no to all these functional requirements or requirements put up by business which needed masking to be in place. So they were super happy with the fact that now the database administrators and the operations team can manage these policies at their end. They have tested this in non-production environment, and they are in a process to roll this out to production now. And
Cool.
they did not see any performance overhead.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I believe also you can complement other features of Aurora Postgres with that, because when I'm thinking about a feature like the fast cloning of Aurora, and because when some customers were doing the fast cloning and at the same time doing the fixed or static masking of the data, they are rewriting the data again, and then they are not fully leveraging the fast cloning feature of sharing the same storage with the original cluster, but using dynamic masking can solve a problem like that.
Uh, to some extent, yes. So
Mm.
what you would probably do here in this case is you would create a clone of the production database and then have a different user
Mhm.
with certain masking policies defined, which
Yeah,
has access to the tables for running all your workload that you want to test in this particular scenario, but won't be able to modify data, or they
sure.
don't need to they don't need to see the sensitive data. So you can run your test suite with these read-only use cases using
Yeah,
that different user. So yeah, you'll have to essentially create the masking policy and treat them
yeah,
differently. You can have the masking policy in the production database all the time, and then just during clone it gets copied over. Uh, Clone is a true copy of the database, so all the
mhm,
metadata, everything is part of it. So your masking policies will be part of the cloned database in even when you clone it or replicate it.
perfect. Kiyo, Samir, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks a lot for being with us. And for all of our viewers, thanks for joining us today. And we'll be seeing you in the new year. We'll be away for 2 weeks for the holidays, but starting from January, we'll be back again with new episodes. So please wait for us, and we will be there with new topics to cover. So thank you so much again, Kiyo and Samir. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you. Bye bye.